You started?
Yes.
Live streaming is on.
is on.
So, should we start?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
the streaming is on.
see.
Yes.
So yours?
So I will share my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, just a minute.
I'm gonna mute so I don't become active speaker.
Yeah. So you can see my screen, right?
Yep, that's your screen.
And you can also see my camera, or
Just your screen.
You can unmute your video. It's muted by default when you start sharing your screen, and then you'll share both.
yes. Yeah, I think.
No.
Yeah. Now you can see me. Yeah. So you can see my screen right now, right?
All good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Let's start. Hello, everyone. Today is our next 10th session of Chapter 5. So this is actually the last session of Chapter 5, and we are having Saul as a guest speaker. He is Principal Software Engineer at 8x8. And today we are going to discuss about Jitsi Meet. This is, as we know, this is a video conferencing tool. So he's going to share his experience about the architecture of this of the tool, and also he will deep dive more technical side of it. So considering our previous 2 webinars where we had some technical issues with Zoom meeting, we as a GOUP community decided to switch to Jitsi, and you can see our live sessions starting from this session on Jitsi. So let me to briefly go through the agenda, today's agenda. So after my brief introduction, we will go to presentation and Q&A and wrap-up sessions. And this is, as I mentioned before, this is the last session of Chapter 5. And these webinars are hosted by GOUP. GOUP is community-driven open source accelerator, and these sessions are hosted by me. I'm Elvira Sirarzada, joining from Seoul, doing my MBA at KAIST. And actually, this is the last session that I'm going to host as a community manager at GOUP. Let me say my thanks to Sakot for giving me a chance to host these sessions. It was a great opportunity for me to meet such a great speakers and interact with people from tech field and expand my network. Thank you very much. So I will continue my collaboration with GOUP. Then the code of conduct is the same. So we are hosting these webinars just for knowledge sharing and experience sharing. We are not aiming marketing or selling here, and equality is the desirable role for us. And we can move to the presentation part right now. Saul, thank you very much for your time and for your enthusiasm, for accepting our request, for participating in this session with us. So you can start presentation right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elvira, and thank you for having me today. I didn't know I was closing the chapter. Now I feel a bit more nervous than 10 seconds ago. Let's dive in, shall we? Today, I'm going to talk about Jitsi Meet, which I like to define it as a state-of-the-art video conferencing. It is a tool we are using right now to record this very meeting. This was a little bit of my preference, or in general, I find that talking about a tool when you're not even using the tool becomes kind of weird. So that's why we're using the tool we're talking about today. So what is it? Well, Jitsi Meet is a turnkey video conferencing platform. So I like to define it as three main things, right? So on the one end is a set of open source projects that allow you to build video conferencing experiences. On another side, it is also a set of SDKs and APIs that allow you to add video conferencing to existing applications. And on yet another one, it is a community of individuals that together build all of these tools. And I'm going to touch a little bit on all of these three topics and how they blend together to build this product. What you have there is a little bit of a mock-up of our latest release, I believe. How the design looks like. So from the perspective of a video conferencing application, it is mostly what you expect, right? You have a bunch of video on your screen, a bunch of features associated with it. Works on web, works on mobile, works almost everywhere, I think. And I think that in today's presentation, what I'm going to focus on is a little bit of what makes it special, or why this project is a bit different than the others. Most importantly is the fact that you can host it yourself. It's fully open source, and you can run it in your own server for your own purposes, configure it differently. I'm going to actually do it and tinker with a test deployment that I have and make some changes to it. And yeah, and then I'd also want Zach or anybody else in the call to also interject while we're going through some stuff if you want a bit more depth in it, because I could be talking about Jitsi for days. So currently, I would say there are three ways in which people can consume or usually consume Jitsi Meet, right? Because as I said, it is a video conferencing tool. So the simplest way, the most straightforward way, is to go to meet.jit.si. It is a free service, and we have a globally scalable platform where you can host your meetings for free. This is actually the platform where this very meeting that you're watching right now is being hosted. There is no login, no account necessary. You just have a link. You go there, click, you're in, done. It's fully featured. So even in this free offering, we have live streaming, we got recordings, breakout rooms. Everything that you would expect from a video platform is there, and it is available for anyone to use. There is a few limitations in the sense that Jitsi Meet supports multiple authentication backends, but we like to model to leave Meet Jitsi as simple as possible, which is to not require accounts and things like that. And that poses some challenges. If you want to have authenticated users on your own deployment, you also have the ability to do that. Which brings me to the next point, self-hosting. So self-hosting is hosting your own Jitsi installation in your own servers. We currently support two main ways to do it. We have a repository with Debian packages, so you can add our repo and do like apt-get install Jitsi Meet, and there you go. You have a bare bones Jitsi Meet installation, and then you can like add more functionality to it by adding more components. And we also have a comprehensive Docker setup. With the Docker setup, every service runs in a container, and you can add more services by booting up the containers that add more functionality. Today in the demo, we're going to use the Docker setup, and we're going to start with a basic installation. We're going to add authentication. We're then going to add some extra functionality, for instance, for shared documents by linking the extra container. And last, and I'm going to talk about this also in another context, is a product that the company that that makes Jitsi Meet, as Elvira said, 8x8 builds, is called Jazz, Jitsi as a Service. It's a SaaS platform kind of thing, and we built it after So this project has been, the Jitsi project has actually been around since 2003, though it had a different shape and form than it is today. It was a Skype-like desktop client. Now, fast forward to right now, we have a video conferencing platform. And what we realized is that what a lot of people want in a video platform is to not worry about it. So you're working on some product and you have some video, like you have the need to embed some video capability in it. And we thought, well, it is like we were already doing it because it has been possible with Meet Jitsi forever. So we just thought of making it an actual product. So this helps with the sustainability of the project as well. I think this is an important topic that doesn't get covered in open source talks a lot, which is all of that free stuff is great, but how do you pay the bills? So I'm going to dive a little bit into that. And we've seen a lot of people take that path where you start by self-hosting and you're happy with it. And if that's what you want, perfect. But maybe once your product achieves certain growth, you may want to focus on your own product and not on infrastructure. So you can transition to JAS and with a peace of mind that if you don't like it or don't want it later, you can always go back to hosting yourself. Now, I'm going to do a little brief architecture overview on what comprises Jitsi Meet itself. The simplest installation where you run it on a single server, all the components talking to each other, like the Docker setup or the basic Debian setup. So, as I said, Jitsi Meet is a collection of open source projects. That is because it's not one monolithic thing that we build. This is not some trend we're following. Jitsi Meet was always built like this because even though this is kind of anecdotal at this point, Jitsi Meet is using the XMPP protocol for signaling. And XMPP also defines, XMPP is the extensible messaging protocol. And it does define this concept of having, a server that does messaging, and then you have other components that add more functionality to this. So in a way, we inherited that architecture, and it blends very well with a service-oriented architecture. So because the main consumer, we're going to talk about web and mobile, which are the two main platforms. Let's focus on the web for a second. And why the web? Well, because browsers, thanks to WebRTC, because Jitsi Meet is WebRTC compatible, your browser is capable of establishing rich, audio and video sessions with, like state-of-the-art bandwidth estimation, congestion control, codecs, all of it. It's inside the browser, so we don't need to, let's say, worry about it all that much. We need to worry about routing that video. So our first entry point, of course, is going to be a web server, because our application is built, it's just a web app with JavaScript that then talks to our backend. So the first place where you enter is our web server. As I said, we use XMPP for signaling, which means the way users find each other and join the same room is because our signaling server, helps them meet in the middle. And our signaling server of choice is Prosody. Prosody is an open source XMPP server. You can deploy it for other purposes, like having your own XMPP installation. But in our case, we use it because every single web client is actually establishing an XMPP connection. And Prosody is written in Lua, and it's very, very flexible. And this allows us to add some extra functionality that Prosody itself doesn't have to suit the needs of Jitsi Meet as a whole. For example, the breakout rooms functionality has a part of it implemented as a Prosody plugin. So as part of our offering, we have a bunch of prosody plugins that allow us to do a bunch of things that are conferencing specific or Jitsi specific. Then we have GCOFO, the Jitsi Conference Focus. And this is what actually orchestrates the meeting, if you will. So in a nutshell, the way a meeting works is every participant joins a chat, a group chat room. Like this is sort of transparent to the web, but under the hood, what happens is that each participant that joins a meeting, like this one, we're all in a chat room together. And GCOFO is also there because it's an admin. It's everywhere. And when there's two participants already in a room, what GCOFO will do is it will find an available Jitsi video bridge, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. This is the video router, and it's going to allocate channels for all of us, and then it's going to sort of send us help us establish a media session between every participant in the room that goes through that particular bridge. And we have some optimizations for the case when it's only two people. So in that case, we establish the connection directly. But generalizing, when participants are in the same room, they will have their media be routed through the Jitsi video bridge, which is the last piece of this puzzle in the picture. So as I said, the Jitsi video bridge is our video router. We employ the architecture of what we call selective forwarding. And in this architecture, what the video bridge does is it routes video packets. It receives the video packets from everyone, and it routes, the appropriate packets to everybody else. This sounds very generic because it is, but the important thing to know is that the alternative architecture is usually MCU, where the media component would decode and mix the video, and that is not what we do. When you do that, there's a lot of you need to do a lot of processing to decode all that video and then do an image composition and then send it to everybody else. What the video bridge does instead is it routes the packets from one participant to the other, and this allows us to scale a lot further than we would if you're using the other type of architecture. There are other components to Jitsi Meet that are not depicted here. Two of the most important ones are Jigasi, or our Jitsi gateway for SIP. This is a gateway, like it would connect similarly to the video bridge. And what it does is it acts as the middleman between Jitsi Meet and the PSTN. So the good old legacy, if you will, telephone network, so that you can have participants that are joining via their phone. Now this, as legacy as it sounds, it happens a lot. And it can happen that you have a meeting to go to and you find yourself stranded, God knows where, and internet is not the thing that's working fine, but the old telephone seems to be working. So you could make a phone call and join a meeting. And another one, and this one we are using right now, is Jibri, the Jitsi broadcasting infrastructure. And Jibri is what takes a meeting and allows us to live stream it. So right now we're live streaming this to YouTube. We support live streaming to an arbitrary RTMP endpoint. YouTube is just one that was the first one we supported, and then we added support for generic RTMP. And we also support recording either to local files, and then this is more for people that do self-hosting, because you need to decide what to do with the files next. Or we have a special integration with Dropbox. And what we do is you authenticate with Dropbox, we get back a token, and then we can upload the meeting recording to your own Dropbox. And then you have it. And this is currently deployed in meet.jit.si. So if you go there, you're welcome to use the service and record your meetings to Dropbox or live stream them to YouTube or elsewhere. I mentioned earlier that aside from the collection of open source projects, Jitsi is a community, and it always was an open source effort going beyond just throwing the code at a wall and hoping someone might find it useful. So we have a community forum which is very active with a number of posts a day. We host a bi-weekly community call where people, like the team, will join this call, and people in the community can join it as well to ask questions about the development, comment on some issues. Very often we will then continue the discussion offline in the forum or in the GitHub issue tracker. But in generally speaking, it is a very quick way to touch base with us, with the team that builds it, and also to know what's new, because we share what we've been working on that particular week or that particular fortnight, rather, in the community call. In our community has helped us a lot in many aspects by creating video guides, infographics, lots of word of mouth in social media, and a lot of this has actually helped us grow organically without us doing any specific effort. This was particularly palpable in the last couple of years when the pandemic took a lot of people online to do meetings, and many people found Jitsi as their chosen option. We are super grateful for it, and we're super grateful that our community helped more people use Jitsi more effectively by filling in the gaps where we fell short, like perhaps explaining a lot of things on how to use this, how to use that. We were busy building the thing, and often we just could do a bit better at explaining what we're building. As I mentioned, in open source, there's an aspect that does not get talked a lot about, and it's sustainability. So I always like to touch on it, because I think it helps see things in context. So 8x8 Inc. is a for-profit company. It's no NGO. It needs to make a profit, and it has a number of products that are all Jitsi Meet based, and that's how the project actually sustains itself. So of course, Thursdays Meet Jitsi is the canonical free meetings offering. We offer this for free. Of course, it does cost money, but we are privileged enough that we are able to offer this for free. At the end of each meeting, you will see a little ad from our own company. So it's not like we inject ads from anybody else. No, we'll just show you, hey, did you know that you can embed this very same meeting experience in your own product? Because maybe that's something you would want. And this is actually my next point, which is Jitsi as a service. As I mentioned earlier, it is a service we started doing that allows us to deliver the flexibility of a custom configuration that you would have in your own self-hosted install without having to maintain that infra yourself. And now we are, and I think this is the first time in video that I talk about this, we're building something new called Jazz Components. And it's in like alpha trials. So if anybody watching this is interested in what I'm about to say, reach out and I'll hook you up. So we're trying to build the best of both worlds, which is, let's say you have a self-hosted installation and works well enough for you and you're happy with it. Now, there are two parts to self-hosting that are, let's say, the hardest, which are recordings / live streaming and the PSTN integration. They are the hardest, not because it's complex, because complexity can be contained, but because it requires a reasonable amount of resources if you want a lot of capacity for recording and live streaming. And the PSTN integration requires that you connect with some kind of VoIP provider that can give you the phone numbers and all of that stuff. So what we think is that those two are parts where people may want us to help them. So while you can run your own Gibris and your own Gigazi, you will soon be able to connect your own self-hosted meetings to use Jazz components, and then we will have the component for recording and the component for PSTN integration, and you will have the rest. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, I think. And this actually helps make the project sustainable because, you know, there's a team of people building it and we all like to earn salaries and all that good stuff. I'd like to touch on, I call it some cool features. I highlighted a couple that I think are very important in meetings products, but they are not, these are technical. These are not flashy features, the ones I want to mention. So first of all is 500 participants. So we, not too long ago, deployed the ability to have 500 participants in a single meeting. I gave an entire presentation about what it took to get us to 500. This was at ComCom this year. I can provide Sako with some links to that presentation, and maybe later in the Q&A, I can pull it up and we can go through a little bit of it if we feel like we want to touch on that. But right now, in Jitsi, in the 8x8 offering, and in your offering, if you have a big enough server, we are able to support 500 participants per meeting. Now, one of the ways, as I said, I'm going to talk about some technical features. One of the ways in which we can accomplish that, 500 participants, that feat, is by optimizing the sender video. This helps with better CPU and bandwidth usage. This helps us on the server, helps the recipients, helps the sender, helps everybody. So what is this? If you have a meeting, our usual layout, let's say, the one you see a mock-up here where you have one person in the large view, like probably the way you're seeing this meeting right now with me in the large view, and then everybody else is in a little thumbnail to the left. Now, in this configuration, you're receiving me in the biggest possible resolution, let's say, and everybody else you're receiving in a very small thumbnail. Now, in this configuration, nobody needs to send the server a big resolution except me. So everybody else will just turn off the high resolution. I'm going to talk about this particular process in the next slide, but basically the optimization is that unless anybody is receiving you in high resolution, there is no need for you to be sending high resolution. So we don't do that. And we also started, this is what we call layer suspension. And this allows us to process less traffic on the server. The clients also send less traffic to the server, which is better for them as well, for the CPU. And it allows us to deliver a little better experience because there's less CPU work to be done. And we also started switching to tile view or gallery view, however you want to call it, when there is more than 2 participants. Except if there's a screen share, we make that we switch to the other view because you probably want to see the screen gray by default. So in this configuration, when you're in tile view, now each tile takes certain space on the screen, right? And depending on how big or small you make your window, those tiles would be bigger or smaller. And we use that size to request the right resolution to the server. Like there's no point in having 1080p HD video if your browser window is so small that your tiles are 200 pixels big. So we adjust that with the server, and that this is an optimization that also helps a lot when you have a lot of tiles on the screen, like when you have a 500-person call as well. Now, I realized maybe it should have been better to explain this one before the previous one, but doesn't matter. Let's do a quick simulcast primer. What is simulcast? Simulcast is actually one of the things that facilitates the previous optimization. So simulcast is that every participant in this meeting, like right now, every participant sends 3 different resolutions to the server. Like it sends its video 3 times. Once in HD, once in like somewhere in the middle, like 360p, and the last one 180p, which is the thumbnail. And what the server does, and this is why, as I mentioned before, the Jitsi video bridge is an SFU or selective forwarding unit. It's selectively forwards. So I send you 3 times my video, and the server selectively decide which of them is appropriate to you. It will only send you one of the 3, but it will send you one. And it is based on A, your choice, and B, some server logic. So, for example, if you're watching me in stage view, is what we call it when it's one participant is large and the others are in thumbnails. So the video for the participant in the large view will go in the large resolution, and then it will send all of the thumbnails. Now, if you're looking at tile view, then maybe let's say you have 4 tiles, or maybe let's say 5 tiles, and you're the 6th. So you have like 6 tiles, so 5 remote participants. Now, that would roughly be the middle layer. So the server will send you all of the middle layers. Now, imagine that you don't have enough bandwidth to receive video for everyone. You cannot receive 5 videos, but you can do 3. So what will happen in that case is that the server will send you the video for the 3 last active participants. We call this last N. Last N is an algorithm we keep to decide who were the last active participants. We do this by normalizing volume levels. And this way, the server starts allocating the video bandwidth based on who these people were. And this way, you will what we try to do is give you the most relevant amount of video based on your constraints or your bandwidth constraints. So on for example, on a 500 participant meeting, you will never receive 500 videos. You will, because A, you will not have the bandwidth, but B, it will also be irrelevant, because at most you're going to see, I think it's 25, but you can change it. Let's say you're receiving 25 tiles. You only have 25 tiles visible. The rest you need to scroll. So why receive video for the tiles that are not visible, right? So we don't. We tell the server, I only have these participants on my screen right now, so please send me the available video for this. And if it doesn't fit because I don't have enough bandwidth, you will not receive it, and we will render the avatar, and that's going to be that. So these are a couple of very important technologies and optimizations that the video platform needs to have, and they're not like something you will usually see on a bullet list of features, because it's sort of it's what you have to do to be able to deliver a gallery or a stage view and a large number of participants. But since we are discussing technical terms, I thought it's important for us to dive a little bit into this. Another important thing where open source usually falls short is documentation. Now, we have a handbook now. This wasn't the case a few years ago, but it is now. And it is tries to be a comprehensive guide to all things Jitsi Meet. So from how to use the mobile SDKs, how to what events are available in the iframe API if you embed a meeting experience in your own application. All of those are documented there. We get tons of community contributions, and it's in that URL, and we're going to go to it in a little bit. So this should be your starting point if you want to dive into Jitsi. It's a good way to get started and take a look and see what path you want to follow. Do you want to just use Jitsi? Do you want to install it yourself? There's a few ways in which you can install it yourself, and they are detailed there, and we're gonna take a look at some now. Oh, and then, for example, there's this guy. You may know him from the news and whatnot. This is a screenshot from one of his appearances, and I put it in a cool feature because I like to say, look, if it was good enough for him, it's probably good enough for many people as well. And it highlights that in his own words, I set up my own technical system for this call. And for us, that was pretty amazing because that's what that's why we make it easy to self-host, because we want people, no matter the technical ability, no matter if you're being chased by the government or you're just Joe Random here, we want you to be able to be successful with Jitsi. So yeah, he made it work. As I said, we also provide SDKs for mobile, for Electron, for React. We got you. So wherever you want to deploy your application that uses Meet Jitsi, you can use any of our SDKs. They are all open source. We have sample applications. Obviously, Meet Jitsi can be thought of as the canonical example of this because that's how it works. It is implemented on top of our own SDKs and APIs, of course. We're going to take a quick look at those in the handbook in a sec. So let's get our hands dirty a little bit. I don't know if there's any questions up until now. If not, I'll just continue.
I have a couple, but I will end, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just taking
So as I mentioned, this is our handbook where all the documentation lies, and we're going to focus on self-hosting today. We're going to look at how to deploy it. We're going to focus on Docker. But you can choose, other ways of deploying. As I mentioned, we've got a number of SDKs. So let's say you want to start thinking about integrating Jitsi into your own web application. You can maybe take a look at the React SDK. And it's as simple as embedding a Jitsi meeting component, passing in some props with what meeting name you want, where do you want it, what config options would you like, and then we provide some helper method props so that you can control it. Works with any Jitsi deployment. With Jazz, it has like extra app ID and shenanigans. Obviously, this is fully open source, as all of the other things we do. This one's written in TypeScript, easy to hack on, easy to check any examples as well. Everybody's more than welcome to take a look at this one if you want to embed the whole meeting experience in your React-based app. Now, let's say you're working on iOS or Android. So we provide a native SDK. We even have a bunch of sample applications, Objective-C in Swift. And in Swift, we have a couple of examples. One I'd like to highlight is the screen sharing. So this is a feature we added in the last year. And we can now do a screen sharing from mobile, iOS and Android. But iOS is a bit trickier to integrate, so that's why we have a sample about it. And here in the SDK, you can see, what CocoaPods to add. If you want to build the SDK yourself because you want to make some code changes to the SDK itself, you can also do that. What API we have, all of it is documented here, right? So now, as I said, let's do a little deployment. So I've got my test deployment here, which is, giving me a 404 because there's nothing. So let's do something about that. So here I'm on my server, and I have checked out the Docker Jitsi Meet repository, which obviously you can find in our GitHub org. It's here. This is our Docker repo, and we're going to use the latest release, stable 7001, and this is what we have in this repo. So we are in this tree. We have environment example file with all of the things. So it comes with lots of commented options. To be honest, a few more than I would like, but it is what it is at this point. And we're going to take a look at enabling some of these services and how we can make it work. By default, it has everything that makes sense enabled, like for security, the lobby, AV moderation, all of those things are enabled. You can use it has Let's Encrypt built in, so you can do HTTPS in your domain easily. And we're going to look at integrating Etherpad, which is a shared document editing thing, let's say. It also has integration with Gigazi, as I said, for PSTN. Authentication, we're also going to take a look. So what you would do is you would copy it so that it's .env, and then to have it this name, and then you would run these script gen passwords, and that will populate some passwords in your environment. Mine are already pre-populated. So only things we're going to look at in my setup is change the ports to 80 and 443 because there is no extra proxy or anything. This is directly exposed to the internet. What's the public URL? And then no longer need to enable the lobby or anything. We enable Let's Encrypt, and I set my own domain and my email address. Comment this one out. So it's not working from get-go, and then we're gonna see how that works. So once we have this, we can just use. Actually, let me real quick show you how in the handbook this is explained. So you copy the environment, you generate the password. Depending on your Linux or not, you may need to create some directories. Mine are created already. So now we can start stack. So I'm going to start in the background. So -D. So we'll boot up. And when we do this with any luck, we now have the default Jitsi installation. Now the question is, does it work? For that, we're gonna, have one participant. Then we're gonna join another participant. Looks like that works. This will actually help me show something. We're going to wait a little second. There we go. We get statistics. There's two participants, and here you can see the remote address is a private IP address, and it says peer-to-peer. This is part of an optimization that we have called peer-to-peer for one-to-one, which is when there's two people in a conference, we will try to establish the connection directly instead of going to the server, because going to the server means, using more resources, also doing simulcast, which you don't necessarily need when it's only two people, and things like that. And now we are going to enter a third participant, and we're going to see how the connection switches from another. So now we got 3 participants in the meeting. They are all there. But if I look at my connection now, we can see that it no longer is peer-to-peer. It goes through the server because we got 3 participants. Now we can also see that for this participant, we're not receiving anything because, well, my computer is about to die with so many Chrome tabs open doing a high definition video. So in that case, we would suspend video for that participant. And after a little bit, when that participant left and we're back to 2, we will eventually switch back to being peer-to-peer. I think I caught it. There you go. We're back to peer-to-peer. So this is the most basic setup, but you already have, let me mute, for example, my video here, and I can mute as well. So in this setup, you already have like a bunch of stuff. So first of all, I think it's important that you think of security in your own meetings. So we can enable the lobby. If we enable the lobby, every participant that joins afterwards will like knock, and we will see a notification, and we can let them in. You can set the password, which can also be helpful to bypass the lobby. But generally, I think the lobby is a better option because otherwise you need to communicate this password somehow. Now, an interesting topic also on the security is end-to-end encryption. And it became also a hot topic in video conferencing in the last couple of years. So as you can see, it is not turned on by default. This is because it's not possible to do end-to-end encryption on all browsers. We need some APIs from the browser, and this currently works in Chrome. And it is, we're still testing it in Safari, and Firefox does not support these APIs that we need. All the data, all the video and audio data, all of it, everything that happens inside the Jitsi meeting is encrypted in transit, which means nothing traverses the internet in clear text. But in order to do all of those routing shenanigans, we need to look into some of the packet information. So technically, the server does have access to the media. Now, if you enable end-to-end encryption, the server will only be able to look at 3 bytes of information, which is enough for it to make all those routing decisions, but it will not be able to look at the payload. We don't do anything with the payload, but it is true that the payload traverses the server because the server decodes it, but on the network, it's always encrypted. And if you want the extra safety, you can always enable end-to-end encryption. We'll probably work on trying to make it automatic once it is more widely available. As I mentioned, we have some moderator controls, like to mute everyone, yada yada. We have this feature to watch a YouTube video together. We added support for background blurring and all of these fancy things that everybody expects from meetings these days. We're using the model, Google's media pipe segmentation model, which is, I believe, pretty much a state-of-the-art background segmentation, as far as I know. And you can check a bunch of settings, especially for moderators. For example, if you want to decide if everybody should start join the meeting muted. This is useful so they don't disrupt a meeting that is already ongoing. You can set if you set your email, we will use Gravatar to download your avatar. So as you can see now, It is my avatar there. And we even give you a quick shortcut to how to embed your meeting, even though this would not have the external API controls. If you want to control the iframe from the outside, where you want to go is to the iframe API, and this will tell you everything you need to get started. Now, backdoor meeting. This is a basic example, but we probably want to do some more. So first, let's look at, for instance, adding an extra service. So let's add shared document capability so two participants can take some notes together while they are in a meeting. So as I mentioned, we go to our environment. Where is that? Oh, there we go. So you just uncomment this thing. And we don't even need to change the value because that is the default for the built-in service. Now we need to run it. So we need to add the extra service, which is in a different file, Etherpad. Now start all of it again. And so what have I done? Oh yeah, I've put up this. I think it is at the end. So now we're well, okay. We started in the foreground this time, so we're gonna get this flooded with logs, but that's all right. So we start a meeting. I'm just gonna mute so that it's not too distracting. So now we should get an extra option that wasn't there before. Open shared document. What does that do? Well, so it will open an Etherpad document here where we can have some stuff. Now, let's say you're another participant who joins the meeting as well. You can also open this document and you can see what the other participant is typing. And I want to add more things to it. So you want that and the other participant. Oh, okay. It's too smart. It knows that we are in the same window. Let me do a better demo. So we're going to open a new browser window. This way it's not going to this. So now we are joining this meeting, and now we are going to open the shared document. There we go. So here we are having this post. And now we can see there's two participants sharing content. And when I type the other participant, where are you? See, is here. There's also a bunch of plugins that work with Etherpad, like whiteboards. You can do images. You can do anything. We support the Etherpad integration is like a first-class citizen, let's say. So if you set the right configuration parameters, you will end up well here. And this is how we can add an external service. Adding a Jibri or a Jigassi, it's a similar operation. So we just have to add the options that we want in the environment file because they are obviously first-class citizens and support it, and they will boot up the right service. Now let's do something else, which I think would be relevant for an application maybe similar to this one. I want my users to be authenticated. So let's do that. First, I'm going to enable authentication. guest authentication, and we're going to enable guests, and we're going to see the difference between having and not having guests. So start over again. This time, remember, we have added authentication. So we're going to try to join our meeting just like before. And whoops, the conference has not yet started because there's no moderator inside. So you can say, well, I am the moderator, let me in, or, cancel and wait. So I think I had created the user before. I don't remember. Yes. So that is me. I made it in. I had created the user. If we go to the Docker deployment, it contains a specific authentication information, and it tells you how you can create users. And this, as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, because we use Prosody as our signaling server, you need to create a Prosody user. If you use something like the LDAP authentication in Prosody, which we also support, your users could be, on an Active Directory or whatever. Now, here we entered authenticated, but if another user joins the same meeting, they do not need to authenticate because we enabled guests. And guests, enabling guests means that every user that will not be authenticated if there is a moderator already in the room. Now let's look at what happens if we turn that off. So we end our meeting. So we'll stop over things. Take a sip of water while that happens. And so we say we want no guests now. Let's start again. Try to join a new meeting. Right away, we need authentication to be able to join. So let's say we log in with our previous login, sure thing. And we are in our meeting. But now, if another user tries to join a meeting, they also need to authenticate because we don't allow guests, which means everybody needs to be authenticated before they can join into this meeting. So this is a little bit of a quick walkthrough as to how to use this setup. I think the simplest setup that we currently provide is the Docker one. And mainly it is because if you go through options here, all you need to do is uncomment some to the right values, and then it will just start working the way you expect, let's say. For instance, let's say that you have your own matrix set up for your own, private conversations. In the last release, we added support for the matrix authentication because matrix has integration with Jitsi, and the matrix developed this module so that the authentication kind of transitions from the matrix realm to the Jitsi realm. These are more like advanced settings that probably shouldn't installation. The thing is, you then of course need some VoIP provider. Jibri is there, lots of configuration options for things like what toolbar buttons you want to see. There's a bunch of stuff that is not covered here, but it should be in the handbook. But this is a good start, and as you might have noticed, we didn't have to do anything special to turn it on. That is because all of the containers regenerate their configuration based on the environment variables the moment they boot up. So if you want to change your authentication config, you just swap it and you restart and you're good to go. And that is all I got demo-wise. So now I'd like to give the mic back to Sako and Elvira, and maybe we can talk some questions you have if you want me to dive a little bit into a specific topic, or whatever you feel like.
Thank you so much, Saul. It was
Thank
really
you. Thank you
great
so
start. So, because coming from DevOps background, I will have a couple questions. So it will be interesting to go with you. So I will start with the security piece, because also what you mentioned, and so one thing, there is no login. So kind of some decisions behind that. Why no login? Or let's say if there is any option, SSO and all this for the companies if they want to use as a custom solution.
Right. That's a good question. So the original reason, I wasn't around back then, but I can guess it's twofold, I would say. So A, it's easier to not do anything than to do something. But then suddenly you find other interesting reasons, which is, so if you have user accounts, it adds friction, because let's say you want to try a quick meeting. You don't need to sign up. You just need to go on the welcome page and click join. And if you click join with one of the suggested meeting names, there's, I think, 1 trillion possibilities. So because it's a combination of 4 words that keep switching. So it is unique enough to be safe enough to get you in. And once in, you can protect it by enabling the lobby or setting up a password or something. But generally speaking, if you choose a randomly generated meeting name, you are good to go. Not having user accounts also means if you plan to operate this service yourself, there might be some implications. For example, GDPR-wise, what personally identifiable user data do you hold? Well, me, nothing. So I don't need to worry. Let's say if I host a service for someone and like, what do you got? I got nothing. So then you don't need to think of that. And then also another thing, I mean, this has kind of diminished with time, but generally speaking, we think of meetings the same way we think of gatherings in real life. So you go with some people you know and to talk about something. If you don't like it, you just leave, right? Now, with, well, the pandemic and our service becoming more popular and whatnot, some other needs arise that we didn't quite envision, which is there's people that need to be in a meeting that don't want to be there, like students doing remote schooling. And for that, we developed the advanced moderation controls, which we didn't have, for instance. Everybody in Jitsi, everybody is a moderator. This is by design, like we enable that, but in your own deployment, you don't need to set this up if you don't want to. And the more important way to do authentication, as you asked, is, and I'm going to share my screen yet again, is if we go into the Docker authentication section, we have 3 types of authentication that we support right out of the box. Internal authentication, which is with the username and password that you saw me do. Authentication using LDAP against an external directory. So this would be a little bit more uh, um, compatible, if you will, with the likes of an enterprise that already has all the things in an LDAP. And then when it comes to integrating with other application, and this is, for instance, how Jazz does it, is we use JWT tokens, JWT tokens. So a token can say if a user should be a moderator or not, or if they should be allowed in this room or not. So when you're thinking of an SSO solution, the way you would implement it would be by having your little backend create a JWT token if the user is authenticated with the right properties. And actually, there is an SSO integration. I'm going here to our third-party software. Yes, Keycloak. So Keycloak is this SSO yada yada integrate backend component, and this Fabian here created an integration between Keycloak and the Jitsi setup. So if you're using the container, the Docker setup, he's telling you here how to enable the JWT-based authentication, and then in this Keycloak-based app, you configure it so you can get the right token and you get authentication working. That is how we do authentication. And in Jitsi, we don't do it. As I say, we don't want to keep user accounts around. We want to make it as simple as possible to use. Now, there is one specific thing that we do have, which I'm gonna, maybe I should just keep sharing my screen, which is the moderated.jitsi.net service. I believe that we have it listed here. So if you go to meet.jit.si, you see this little blurb text that says book a meeting URL in advance where you are the only moderator. This is a special service that you can also deploy yourself, by the way, because it is right here. It's called moderated meetings. It's a microservice to do this thing. So what Jitsi moderated meetings is a way to generate a random meeting where you've got two links, the one for the guests and one for moderators. So if we copy this one, so if we use this link, we are going to join as a moderator. And if we use this link, we're going to not join as a moderator because we're going to be a guest. And this is another way in which you can kind of have, we try to have that simplicity. So you don't need to do a lot, but you can get that power where, let's say you're going to do a class, so you want to prevent that case where the student joins before the teacher and they do something disruptive like set the password to whatever they want so the teacher cannot join it. So then they need to change the link. It becomes a bit of a mess. So we developed this for those cases as well.
So
and in general, there are
follow up for the professor you mentioned. So can they also make a call to the meeting, or they just need internet to join the call?
Oh, no, it's a normal meeting. So all of the services that apply to a meeting, like if you have deployed PSTN access, you have it, all of that is still there. It's just that you make sure that you are going to be a moderator and not them. That's like the main difference.
Okay.
And we use it.
Yep.
Yeah, we use a token to do that actually. What that link will do is it will give you a token and it will not give a token to the others. And our configuration is such that in that moderated subdomain, unless you have a token, you're not a moderator. And the only way to receive a token is if you have like the secret URL, let's say. So long as you don't share that link with anybody, only the guest link, you're good. that is our way to do this authentication for this particular scenario. But as you saw, there's like others, and basically, since like users need to be authenticated into prosody, so our authentication is kind of the prosody authentication. It's just how you talk to it, and it supports more authentication mechanisms than the ones I mentioned. But I think these three are the most important ones, I reckon, because actually you could even limit it into two. So internal auth for the simple use case, and JWT for everybody else, because at the end of the day, you can always make any authentication system spit a token, and then you're off to the races. So I would say those are the two more important ones. In a corporate scenario, LDAP could come handy. And kind of going back to where it started about community, the LDAP config for Docker was actually one of the initial contributions to the Docker setup. It was not written by us. There was a community member that wanted to leverage it, so he did all the work, added all the environment variables and all the configuration in the rightful places, so it just works.
Awesome. Actually, I probably needed to ask it earlier to go back. How you started to get involved with the project? I mean, and how it was born? Like, was there anything like
You mean auth related or the project itself?
Jitsi itself, the project?
Jitsi itself.
Yeah.
Well, that is a great question. I am also going to. So after this, you're gonna need to ask me for a bunch of links. So I'm just going to tell you what you need to ask me for, and then you ask me for it. Earlier this year at FOSDEM, is this conference that happens in the Free University of Belgium every year. I shared the main stage, well, the virtual main stage, with the founder of the project, Emil Libov. We talked about this at length. But so Jitsi started as his PhD thesis project. And it was not called Jitsi, it was called SIP Communicator. And it was a VoIP soft phone that used SIP written in Java. Then it got renamed to Jitsi, which it actually means wires in Bulgarian. So now you know the origin. And it continued to gain features. It became video capable. And then it gained this one important thing, which is at one point after it could do video calls. So yeah, like remember that at the time the competition was Skype. That was the one to beat. So after Jitsi had video calling capability, at one point it gained video conferencing capability. And the way it gained it was that one user in the meeting became the focus, and everybody sent their video to them, and they dispatched the video to everybody else. Now, very quickly, you realize that this only works for very small calls for people with very good internet, because you're sending everything to one person in the meeting. Now, so after this became clear, what happened was that this concept was spun out to the server, and thus the video bridge was born. And to go with it, the focus, so that it could do the organizing of the channels to put everybody in the same room. And if you see at that point, even so you had a desktop client talking to these backend components to do the video routing. So this is when the concept of the SFU was born, let's say, that capability. And the Jitsi video bridge is the first open source SFU that has existed, if I'm not mistaken, in this regard. Now, in 2012, Google announced, was it 2012? Yeah, WebRTC. So, and a few years later, all the ducks were in a row. And so Jitsi could replace the desktop client with the web client that talked to exactly the same components. And thus you have Jitsi Meet, what we have today, and it completely pivoted to this setup where you do online meetings rather than trying to be a Skype killer. All of the, like, if you look at the landscape, desktop communication applications have kind of dwindled down, and everything happens in the browser. And being WebRTC compatible just gives you so many things for free, if you will. Like, you no longer need to do your own media stack and all sorts of crazy things that you had to before. Like, you can focus more on your own product, on your own differentiation than in tweaking your bandwidth shenanigans and your jitter buffers and your codecs, because the browser has all of that. You still need to do the backend, which is no easy feat. Like, I'm underselling it, if you will, but I'm only saying that because we already built it, and there's others that build it as well. So it's it is something doable, but having to do the whole thing at this point is like it would be a very tall order. Even for instance, I believe Facebook Messenger on mobile uses libWebRTC as well for the media stack. I think WhatsApp was not using it. It was using part of another stack called PJSUA that was originally built for like more VoIP style clients. But the concept is similar, which is building that stack from the ground up these days is, I'm not sure if it's worth it. I mean, if you have deep enough pockets and a lot of time, and the question would become, what do you get out of it? So in that sense, WebRTC gave this even playing field for everyone. And with the right backend and a lot of other bells and whistles, you can create pretty good video conferencing experiences in the browser, which was totally not a thing before WebRTC existed. So we have first Google to thank them for it, because open sourcing WebRTC and then going to the standards bodies to make it a standard web API was not a small effort. Way back when, it was estimated that it would take like 60 million worth of salaries and whatnot to produce a WebRTC. It's probably more these days. And the way it came about was it was actually an amalgamation of things they had acquired from different companies. If I recall correctly, one of them was GIPS, which is the company that built the Echo Canceller in Skype. And I believe we all remember it was good. So, and then Google even replaced it and improved it and replaced it again. I forget what iteration we are right now. But so it's a very solid media pipeline. And that's a little bit of the story of the project. So thanks for asking. I love to tell that story, but it's not something I like to lead with, because then it's like, oh, there we go. Like all story times.
No, it's really great to hear where it's coming from. So, yeah, Elvira, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I wanted to ask one question. Saul, you mentioned before, like actually you showed the configuration parameters that we can add for our web conferences. So is there any easy way to do it, like choosing the ready package that, for example, I want to host the conference where I wanted to show, as you showed, I want to show my like the shared file. So without going to change the configuration, I can just quickly Google it and like click to the link where it's already by default is already there.
I don't think so. So, like, the thing is, yes, you need to change one parameter in one file, but then you also need to start your Docker stack with that container. So it's a bit of a conscious decision. So the default file, so the env.example, is already pre-filled. All you need to do is uncomment one line, and then the button will show up. Obviously, if you don't deploy the container, then the link will take you nowhere. So you better do it. But for instance, the cost of adding that, so that is a one-time cost. You don't need to. It's not something you need to keep on doing. So if you want to deploy with Etherpad, all you would do is uncomment that setting, start a container, and you're done. You no longer need to do anything. Just make sure that container is up, just the same way you need to make sure the rest of the containers are up. And then all your meetings will have that capability. It's not like, I think I know what you mean. Like, we do have, so for regular configuration options, you can even, for example, I don't know, do you want to disable peer-to-peer for some testing? Or do you want to change some resolution configuration? So that you can either set the environment variable, but you can also put it in the URL. We have a syntax documented in the handle where you can do like a hash config dot name of the setting equals value, and we automatically overwrite the value of the internal config with that one for what we call whitelisted values, which is, we don't allow you to change key internal things like authentication like that. No, you cannot change it. That's set and done. But the others you can. But this one, because it requires a backend component, it's a bit different because it's not like you can make the decision without both places agreeing. It's like, imagine you want to enable the recording. Well, you need the Ghibli, otherwise recording will not work. So that's why you need to configure it as such, and also make sure you start a container.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I had a follow-up question for that, because if you use the cloud version, all this stuff for example, setting up, can we pass this in URI? For example,
You mean,
for example,
so
enabling lobby. Yeah, when we have that link plus
yes,
as a header.
yes, you can, but enable lobby. So I realize I named that setting wrong. Because well, enable lobby means that the lobby capability is available, not that it's turned on by default.
Lobby.
So enable lobby equals 1 means that if you go like in this meeting right here, the 3 dots security, and the lobby is turned on. The fact that that section shows up there is that the lobby is enabled in like configuration wise. If you don't enable it, that section is gone. Now, some people want like, one of the things we cater for, as I mentioned, is integration, right? We think is our way to go. And there's so many different needs. And one thing, it never occurred to me, right? So in a medical scenario, it's in a medical scenario, it was dealing with some patients with some kind of anxiety related thing. And for them, seeing lots of options can be overwhelming. So what our customer, which is a healthcare provider, did was disable a lot of the features, because it's just too many things going on, and it actually is detrimental for the conversations they want to have with the patients. So that's why we have a lot of enable this, enable that, and it usually means that these features should be available or not available. Now, the lobby, it actually poses an interesting challenge, because there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So we have had this request many times. Can I enable the lobby by default? And the answer is no, because who would let you in? That's the thing, is how does the first participant make it into the room otherwise? That's the tricky part.
Somebody has that.
And yeah, but then that somebody is the one that enables the lobby. that turns it on. So one thing that's interesting also from the architectural standpoint is that our meetings are ephemeral. So even though you have that link from the moderated meetings, or you can copy and paste the link anywhere, the meeting doesn't physically, well, as long as physically, whatever physically means, but it doesn't exist until there's one participant in. It's nowhere. There is no system with the list of upcoming meetings. That doesn't exist. So like you can simulate it when you use tokens, because you can create a token for a given room name and you can give it an expiration time. So then you can say, well, this token is only valid starting half an hour from now until an hour from now. And then if you try to join before, that name cannot be joined. But that doesn't mean that that room exists. So right now, this weirdly named room exists because we are in. If we leave, that room ceases to exist, and all of the things we have turned on, like the password, the lobby, everything gets destroyed. And so enabling the lobby always is also challenging, because that means, well, the meeting doesn't exist, so yay. And then the second is, well, how would we let you in? The only case that I think would be workable, but funny enough, is not a use case in that we can easily support in Meet Jitsi, which is where kind of more people seem to want it, is with tokens. So I think we could make it so that the lobby is always on. When the moment the meeting is created, the lobby is on. So that's fine. And then we could let you in if you are a moderator, if the token says you are a moderator. I think that is something that would be attainable. It's not there. Someone needs to write the code, but that would be doable. But I think this doesn't solve the general thing. But then again, it's this chicken and egg problem. So it's not very clear to us what needs to happen. So maybe we'll get around solving it one day. I don't know. But for now, that is a limitation. So I would say if you want to make sure that you are in charge of a room, and is it only you because you are potentially meeting with adversarial participants, which, like students, better use a moderated meeting because I will guarantee that they cannot disrupt it.
Actually, so because you keep also mentioning about ephemeral, let me maybe dig down from DevOps perspective. So you mentioned the 4 components, you have prosody, web server, and all these. So in the cloud version running, so I will assume it's multi-tenant, yeah?
Yes. Well, actually, the Docker setup is also what we call multi-tenant. Like if you look at this URL, for example, right, the current URL, it's got meet.g.si, so that's the main domain, and then it's got /moderated. So that thing is what we call a tenant, and then /meeting name. So you have like these 2 namespaces. So
Okay,
if
so
you have,
you can have on that namespace multiple meetings as well.
exactly, you can have meetings with the same name so long as they are in different tenants.
So how the scaling piece will work? So for all these components, are stateless or in file system, or there is, because I haven't seen any database or for data storage.
There is no database. No.
No?
There is no database.
That's amazing. So,
but well, the thing is, what would you put in the database, really? Right?
So what you will put in the database, because the token we generated, and it's still valid. So,
yeah.
but it's
but that goes in the URL. In the URL, it's a JWT, which is serialized in the URL. So the nice thing is that all the state is in the URL. So for example, so when we scale up, what we do is we multiply. So let's say you take the Docker setup, right? and you want to support more participants. So the very first thing you need to do is add more JVB instances, more video bridges, because the way scaling works is that GCOFO will allocate meetings in different bridges to balance the load. That's one thing. So the load just spreads by the fact that there is multiple bridges that can handle the load. That is where most of the load concentrates, because they need to do all the video routing. And if one bridge goes down, you know, you will get an error screen says, "Oh, reload," and then when it reloads, because everything is in the URL, you will just end up in another bridge. But the same, everybody in the meeting will get the same error, so you will all end up in the same place. Because GCOFO will say, "Well, this bridge died, so I'll allocate another one," and that's it.
So
now, obviously, that means that also your password will be gone, maybe. If you are in an individual setup, then no. If you are in a sharded setup like ours, so our setup, let me try and share something. I'll try to go briefly on it. So scaling, no, not you. Let me see. So I have this presentation that I've given, and I can also send you links. Yes. Okay. So window, play in the window. So this is not current. We have, but the concept is the same. It's just that now things are in different places. In this presentation, I was going about how we transition from parts running in the AWS to Oracle, but the concepts are the same. So we have the concept of a shard, which is composed of two types of nodes: a signaling node that contains Nginx, Prosody, and GCOFO, and then media nodes, which are the JVBs, which we have multiples of them in a single shard. And so in a single shard, meetings are distributed across the media nodes because GCOFO selects the least used JVB. They keep sending stats to each other. Let's say, well, the JVB shares the stats of utilization, and so GCOFO will pick an available bridge to host a meeting. Now, when we were deploying everything in AWS, in a region, we had multiple shards. And then we had HA proxies that sent the meeting to the right shard. If the meeting didn't exist before, they just sent it randomly to a shard. But once a meeting is created, well, once a URL was visited for the first time, let's say, the HA proxies have a synchronized stick table. So they keep a list of meeting pointing to what shard. So if another participant joins the meeting, they will end up in the same shard. Otherwise, you would have like a split brain kind of situation where it's like, okay, I went to this URL, but I'm alone. And then the other person, well, I'm there as well, but I'm alone. And you don't want that. And fronting those HA proxies, we have an ALB in a region. But now if we zoom out even more, we used Route 53 and Global Accelerator so that you would always have the meetings in the region that is closest to you. So, and this usually started with like the person who joins first. So if the person who joins first is in Europe, we will, for example, create the meeting in EU Central, EU West, and that's where the meeting would happen. Now, we have done another thing, which I have. Where do I have it? Let's see if I have it around here.
I love it because this is complete.
So another one is Octo. So which I only have this slide about it, but Octo is cascaded bridges, and it's when when you will join a bridge that is closer to you, and then your bridge will talk to my bridge. And this is how we achieve distributing the media. So signaling wise, you will still come to Europe and join the same room in the same prosody in the same GCOFO, but your audio and video, like the more critical real-time parts, you will be in one that's in the US and I'll be in one that's in Europe. And this is actually likely happening right now. If you look at your own, like what we call the GSM bars indicator thing, let me try and see. So I think I am fighting with the follow me. So I am connected to, so we are connected to Asia Pacific Northeast one. So I suppose that Elvira joined first. And that's why we're connected to that. But if you look at your own tile, you see connected to AP Northwest 1 from US West 2. So you, Sako, are connected to the Asia Pacific region through US West 2. And you can see this we have it in the statistics over here.
We have
as well.
Emmanuel from Africa.
Well,
question, but yeah. Hey, Emmanuel.
Yeah. So he is connected to EU Central 1. In this case, I think it might be the closest region we have to there. So that is, but that is how we deploy it. So as you can see, it's a stateless insofar as there's no global database of meetings or anything. And of course, this has the disadvantage of if a meeting dies and needs to be recreated elsewhere, let's say, but so if a region dies or if a server dies or something. But the thing is that due to the nature of the way the meeting interactions work, this is like a lot less of a deal than it is to have the huge complexity of having a centralized list of things, plus again, personally identifiable data, yada, yada, yada. And if you use tokens, all of the important things are in the token itself. So, for example, if you're using Jazz, which is basically the same thing as this, except that all the users will need a token created by you. If you are a customer of ours, you will upload your public key, have your own private key, create tokens for all of your users, so we know how to bill you and everything. The point being that in that token, you already specify what rooms they can join. Are they a moderator? Yes or no? And all of these things. So the page will reload if the server dies, and you will end up somewhere else with the same experience because the token has everything that you need to carry on with the meeting. In a normal scenario, it will be, similar in this sample deployment. And the reason why I like to stress that out a bit is because Jitsi Meet is this collection of components that you can configure in many ways. And Meet Jitsi is one way to configure them. And the Jazz deployment is a bit different because it caters for different needs. What you would install in your own company would be different. And so that's why we make all of these pieces configurable so that you can kind of mix and match and create the experience that you really need.
Actually, a bit dummy question. So why the experience is much better than Google Meet while they came up with WebRTC?
Well, thanks for the compliment. I'll take it as a compliment.
I mean, that's so.
Why?
So
well,
fun.
I think that so it is true that we all have the same tools for the most part, let's say, but the user interface is probably one important factor, like how easy it is to use and all of those things. And then, of course, trying to be as smart, like all of the routing logic, the selective forwarding unit, like that's the black magic right there. So that's where you can sense that something is happening, because it needs to do bandwidth estimations. It needs to estimate how much video you can consume, how much video you're able to send, and all that good stuff. And so If it does a bad job, then you would be like, why am I not able to receive good quality video? Like, if the sender is sending it in good quality, why am I not receiving it in good quality? So that is the part where we spend. I mean, it's kind of funny because we do spend a lot of time in everything, but basically, but the JVB is the most important component when it comes to quality, and then the UI, as Apple likes to say, design is how it works. So it's important to also have a good design so that things are obvious, things are easy to use. We have, our UI is actually, I would say that now it's at its best. It's not perfect, but we have made great strides. And part of it is thanks to, I like to give a shout out to our design colleagues at 8x8, that TV in particular, have really helped us push this to the next level, because our UI is now way better than it was years ago.
So actually, coming to the shutout, project is growing a lot. I'm sorry if we are going a bit over time, just let me know. And yeah. So how the community hiring, bringing people, training, and all this stuff. So obviously they start, you point first to the documentation and so on, but then you need kind of at some point also uplevel them to maintain it, trust, believe, and kind of give the keys of the castle. And so how
you
that's your
mean
strategy? Yeah, like,
you mean how we handle the community participation?
so coming as just user of the product,
Right.
so and
I
then
see.
contributor.
So
yeah.
So we have a bunch of people in the community that they like to hang out in the forum, helping others, sharing what they know. We have that profile. Then we have another profile, which is people that send patches of varying complexities. And we have a documented process of becoming a committer. So if we deem that if you are a frequent enough contributor, if you show up and you do good work, we will give you commit access. And that means that now commit access means actually we don't allow committing directly to master, so everything needs to go through pull requests. So commit access means you can merge pull requests or approve pull requests that others send. At the end of the day, we are product driven. So where we are going is defined in this case by 8x8 product, which is actually Emil Lvov, so the founder of the project. So we always try to accommodate many contributions, desires from the community, but it is important to also know that and I am one of the people that spends most of their time in the community steering pull requests, and one of the things I do a lot is say no, because not everything has a place. So it's like, sure, I get it. The feature that you want makes sense to you or to many people. However, that is not something we would like to include in the core product. Because contributions are also a bit tricky in the sense that it's not free, because we now become the maintainers of that thing you sent us. So we now need to keep pushing it forward. And so that has that little nuance to it. So we typically try to find a balance, which is, can we add an API so you can do that from outside? Does it make sense to be in the core? For example, we had this little debate with breakout rooms. It was a heavily requested feature. We did a hackathon with the European Commission, and one of the finalists contributed this feature. I worked with this person afterwards to steer it and push it over the finish line. And that's what we have today in Jitsi. It was an external contribution. And we didn't see a way in which this was properly doable from the outside. So even though it was a huge undertaking and it's a big change, we decided that it was best to incorporate it and work together and put it inside. And some other times it's like, no, we don't think that has a place. Like right now, one thing that someone requested that we, I don't know if you knew, but in Android and iOS, neither of them allow you to use the camera and the flashlight at the same time. However, if you use the lower level APIs, you are able to use the flashlight and the camera at the same time. The reason why they don't allow you to do it seems to be something about the sensor, I think, but also because it doesn't make sense. And someone was saying, hey, I would like an option to enable the flash. Like, no, dude. Like, I get it. I don't know if you're having your video meetings in the dark or you want to go and find stuff while you're in a meeting, but there's such a niche use case. We cannot just add that, because all the, like, every button you add in the UI is a decision that someone needs to make consciously. Do I click that? Do I not click that? It's overwhelming having too many. So at one point, our job is to think if this is a feature that should be in the product or not be in the product. And that's sort of how we handle it. We communicate through the community, through our bi-weekly call, and we discuss these things. We encourage early discussions so that nobody's like, oh, I built this thing and now would you take it? It's like, well, you have talked to us. I've told you don't build it that way because we're not going to take it. Or yes, we are. Let's discuss the design. So we have something that's going to be integrated easier, for instance. So yeah, that's the nature of open source. So
just coming from Nginx, because spending some time also with the source code, it was also static and dynamic, modular and modules, and you could just kind of pluggable most of the stuff. So would it be easier for the people just come as more like, as you say, as API, or they just come and add their own modules? And
we have, like, ever since we started building Jazz, one of the things that we've done is build a lot of APIs. Like a lot of them. You can now even, for instance, customize a button so that it doesn't do the thing it does by default, and instead it runs like you can run something to that degree. And every once in a while, the plugin concept comes on the table, but I don't even know how that looks like, in the sense that this is a web app. Like, how are you going to make something that looks and behaves as if it was part of the app if you're running like outside of our JS bundle? You don't have our UI toolkit, our styling, our whatever. Like, that's not an API because it all gets bundled and built into a single app. So yes, you could do plugins, but then you need to build the app. And like, that would mean that you host your own front end or something. So it's not clear to me that we can do plugins that way. What we're usually doing is, adding APIs, so you can, because as I said, very often, if you integrate the meeting, you integrate it on an existing web portal. So you can always add more controls in your own portal that interact with the meeting with our API. And then that's where you would put your extras, whatever it is that you feel like putting in there.
I see. Thank you. Just for the sake of time, I will probably go for our last question. Maybe some.
All right. Let's do the last one. Make it count.
Yeah, for the roadmap piece, and this is where it's great as for us as open source project, and just give you some also idea, and but also smaller team, let's say startups, if they want to use it and so forth, so they can create different for the teams and so forth. And this stuff was mentioning, you like having in one place, yeah, and kind of
Well,
all the
one way
configured coming back.
I know some providers have been doing that. Like for us, I mean, the way I say it, for example, again for startups, honestly, if you're just going to use it as a tool, you can use the free tier, and you can install we have a Slack integration, so you can do /Jitsi, and it creates a meeting and drops a button. You click it, you're in the meeting, randomly generated, done. So I would say if you want to, spend zero on for just communication, you're more than welcome to do that. We don't ask anything in exchange. If I were to ask something, would be, tell your friends about us. And if the thing is, what if you want to build, a video experience into your existing application? So we have a free Jazz tier, and there you can start tinkering with it, and then you can, as your business grows, jump up the tiers. We have one that caters for very small, because we bill by monthly active user, by MAU. So I don't want to go a lot into it because it sounds businessy, but basically there is a Jazz free tier. Then you can, well, actually, I think I'm not even sure anymore because we changed it a bit. Let me check real quick. Oh yeah, so we have the developer version, which is like 25 monthly active users, which is free. And then there's like 300, 1500, 3000, and whatever. So if you're building a video experience into an existing app, you can always sign up for the free tier hosted, start tinkering with it, and then as you grow, you can get a bigger plan, or you can talk to us. And I believe we, depending on the use case, we always like to understand what our customers need, right? So that would be, I would say, how a startup could go about using what we are using. First, you can just use the product, then you can build on top of it, still at no cost, and then build it. And we've seen this no-code trend being picked up, and we find ourselves somewhat, well, that's what we're doing. We just didn't know it had a name. So you don't have to build the whole thing. You just embed the experience that we have. There's more providers that do similar things to what we do, but I believe we were the first to do this thing with the entire iframe thing, because there's other providers that they provide low-level API, so you need to build the whole thing from the ground up. Like, yes, they will do all the video routing and everything, but they don't give you a UI. So our main way of integration is the iframe API, and that gives you everything you see right now. You can replace the Jitsi logo with your own logo and do other sorts of stuff, but in a nutshell, that's what you get. And then if you really need a completely different user interface paradigm, you can still use us. We have a lower level API called Jitsi Meet, and there you get just streams and stuff like that, and participant joined events. And hey, here's a participant stream. Where do you want to render it? It's up to you. Like, you do the UI. We only do the signaling and all of that stuff, which is closer to what other vendors are also offering. But I think our strength is in kind of the low code side of it, which is, with just a few lines of code with that React component, you suddenly have meetings inside your own application without doing any of the work that it takes to build the meetings app experience.
So I know. No, I have to ask you. So if we're gonna host our own version, yeah, from the planning perspective, let's say we're gonna have 20 in average meetings and so forth, and based on that, how to scale the infrastructure and so forth. Is there any similar data that can relate that for this kind of workload, usually this number of people joining you need?
Right. So the thing is, we don't provide numbers because it heavily depends on the hardware that you're using, how many cores, how many this, how many that. Lots of people have shared in our community their numbers, like, well, using these servers, I can do this many. But as I said, whatever road you pick, so self-hosted Docker, self-hosted Ubuntu installation, let's say, you can always add more JVPs. So, which it will be your first problem to solve. Like, I think if you go beyond needing the concept of one shard, so if you go beyond needing multiple this, you're probably better off outsourcing this, because you're going to spend so much time managing infrastructure, monitoring, security. At the end of the day, it's like, what is your business? Operating this infrastructure or building your own thing? But if you just want to host it for your hackerspace, you're a small company because you want to host it because you like self-hosting like I do, then starting with the Docker setup, that will take you, it should take you no problem if you put it on a big enough server, up to like 100 participants, I think. If it's like, something these days, you can get so many things out there easy. And we have another link that you need to ask me for. We have a GitHub organization called Jitsi Contrib for repositories that like for projects that people work on that are ancillary to Jitsi. So we want to promote them under our brand name and handbook and everything, but they are not necessarily done by us. And one such project is a Kubernetes Helm chart. So if you want to deploy,
I was going to contribute it, but then I saw that that's already hit there. So.
Yeah. So if you wanna, if for example, so the Docker setup, like the one we support, is the simplest setup with Docker Compose in a single host. But if you want to go like beyond that, multiple bridges, deployed, for instance, on Kubernetes. So the community has built that; it exists, and there you can basically scale the JVB and have replicas, have multiples of them, and then it basically multiplies your capacity. If you you can even enable Octo so that you do these cascaded bridges as well. But in general, for multiple bridges, you could just enable it just fine. So you could use it. But you could just not do, and that's also fine. And you can scale to hundreds of participants per meeting just by putting more bridges to the task.
But I didn't saw in your infrastructure very shared. So, and I saw the HA proxy. Was it like any particular reason using HA proxy?
It's for the stick tables. So when the traffic arrives at the region, so there's a mapping between meeting and shard. So the first time a meeting, if it's not in the list, we send it to an arbitrary shard and remember this choice. And then there's hard bits. So Nginx is the ingress on each shard, is the thing that proxies over to prosody, for example. And it does some filtering. But we, for instance, the static assets we serve from the CDN, from a CDN. But the reason why we use those two is because HA proxy is the ingress proxy to the signaling, and then HA proxy is the one that sends the meeting to the right shard. Because, for example, the reason why we are all found ourselves in this meeting is Elvira joined first, and she created the shard was created in Asia Pacific, and then you joined, I joined, and we were routed to that shard from a different region.
Yeah, the signaling going through that.
Yes, the signaling needs to be in the same prosody, in the same GCOFO. That's where we all meet up. And then our audio and video sessions, the multiple bridges can be involved, as I said, but signaling, that's where it remains today.
Awesome. I think we can say nice job. So I really love the simplicity. I mean, I was, to be honest, when before reaching you, also when we were talking last time, I was seeing it's very complicated project, a lot of things going here and there, and similar to Kubernetes and so forth, so many companies, and obviously there is a company like Zoom is pretty much, you can see that running and as a multi-billion company. And so, but from user experience, it doesn't matter, and for us. So, and with that simplicity and thing, I am really impressed, and I
Thank
definitely
you.